Hello, Salt Strong and Fish Strong Nation. Joe Simons here.
And Luke Simons.
What's up, Lukey?
Dude, just ready to talk some red fishing.
Red
Louisiana
fishing.
versus Florida. It's going to be good.
Yeah, so this entire episode is going to be about redfish in Florida versus redfish in Louisiana. A lot of
Similarities
people,
and differences.
yeah, and a lot of people think that all these redfish are different, and you're going to see a theme here that a redfish is a redfish is a redfish. Whether you're fishing in Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, up to North Carolina, and we're going to prove some of that. But there are some differences, and we'll talk about those as well. But I think you're going to be blown away when you see. We're going to show some footage. So for those of you watching this on YouTube, you're going to see some footage. If you're listening on the podcast, awesome too. We'll try to visually explain this as visual as we can. And I would encourage you to go back and watch it on YouTube as well to see some of the footage. But, yeah, we want to do this because we honestly didn't really know what to expect. We went out there with Captaincy Richardson to Venice, Louisiana area recently, stayed at Cajun Fishing Adventures, and had a stinking blast. And as soon as we got done, Luke and I were talking about it on the way home, and we're like, man, we got to do a podcast about this and just talk about everything we learned to go out there and consistently catch redfish all year long, regardless of where you are. So, Luke, where do you want to begin, dude?
Yeah, let's talk about, I would say some of the similarities. We've been teaching, fishing for a while now. And a lot of people say, we mostly fish in Florida. Like I just love exploring new areas. So I go up and down both coasts as often as I can. And it really is shocking. I used to think that I'd have to learn like one region at a time. And then when I go, say like Tampa to like Crystal River, where there's a lot less mangroves or really no mangroves. It's all, more tidal flow, like sawgrass instead of mangroves. And I thought it'd be like a totally different environment where to kind of have to like start over. And the answer so far and everywhere I've fished is that it's not. Yes, there are some differences, but they're always small. They're always like the overall strategy is always the same. Those fish are going to be holding in the same types of spots. But there are some tactical differences that do need to be considered. And like obviously like water clarity is one thing, but from Louisiana, it was surprisingly similar as far as like the types of areas that the redfish would be in and like when the best bite is versus when they slow down. I'll say in general, like the similarity is like if you know a trend that's happening, it's going to be pretty much happening in all regions at that given time.
Cool. So let's dissect Florida first, and just let's talk about in the state of Florida, particular, why, when, where, like what are you looking for? Are you looking for certain structure, certain tidal flows? What's like the perfect redfish feeding zone?
Well, that's all seasonal. There's not an answer. The short answer is there's not an answer.
Luke, I want some answers today. So, all right, do it by season. So let's hit up all 4 seasons.
Let's talk about right now. So if you're going out fishing right now, it's hot, right? This is September, one of the hottest months of the year, and so that's a big factor. We need to consider the heat. The science behind it is that the actual water has less dissolved oxygen. Hot water has less dissolved oxygen than cooler water. So we know that the hotter the water, the less oxygen that's going to be in the water. And that's obviously what fish need for energy. So that's a bad combination, right? The hot water speeds up their metabolism. They're burning more energy. And so the water that they're in needs to have oxygen, needs to have a lot of oxygen. So like those back bays that are good during the wintertime are often not good during the summer because they're just flat hot. They're going to be, dark, muddy bottom, not much water flow. So right now, I mean, I like to find areas that have, that have oxygen, that are oxygen rich. Meaning that there's current, like just having some current flow gets oxygen, having some sort of aquatic vegetation, right? That actually gives oxygen in the water, and it actually cools it down a bit too. The sun's energy gets absorbed by the grass instead of getting just straight into the water. And another one is just the depth, right? So like a shallow water, right? That sun's going to be heating up the entire water column, and it's going to be hitting the bottom, which is just going to kind of heat it up as well. The deeper the water, the sun can't penetrate all the way down, and it'll just be cooler. So right now, on like if I'm fishing in the middle of the day on like tomorrow, if I'm going to go tomorrow and fish in the middle of the day, I'll be looking for areas that have current, deeper water nearby, and ideally seagrass there as well. Find that combination along with bait. There's probably going to be some redfish.
What's the ideal depth?
Again, that's all situational as well. Like in Goodland, we went down there last weekend. That's like just the very tip of the Everglades. For those who haven't been there, it's just south of Marco, and it's all, just like everything. There's not an absolute best water depth. There's not an absolute best water temperature. Is, in my opinion, at least, if you're in the hot spectrum, which we're at now, it's all about trying to find the water that is a little bit cooler than everywhere else, right? So they're looking for colder water. You don't have to have like the perfect temperature. It just needs my ideal spot would be, and this is the area that I went to in Goodland and actually had a great day, caught a ton of fish, but it was the one spot in this really big bay that the whole bay was all stagnant. There's not much water flow, and it was all shallow. And this one spot was a creek that emptied out into it that had the moving water. It had deeper water, and that's where the fish were. And I just sat there and I was catching fish all day long, even in the even at like noon, at the hottest point of the day.
And so what tide?
It was outgoing.
Outgoing that had the most success.
But it doesn't matter the tide. Like I care less about. I used to only fish incoming tide because that's what I heard everybody, for redfish in particular, because that's what it seemed like all the TV shows were talking about. And that's like what I read in the magazines. Oh, incoming tide's the best tide, and yes, there is there's a little bit of truth to that because the incoming tide does push cooler water up on the flat, but it's really just the current. I don't really care if the water is going in or out. I just want it to be moving. So it's situational and it's seasonal, but as long as you keep the general factors in mind, they will work regardless of where you are.
Cool. All right, so apply that same thinking and tactics and timing to Louisiana. So we're just there, super hot.
Yeah.
Where were all these fish? And
so we were fishing, and we particularly wanted to be sight fishing, and so we told CA, and so he was taking us back. We were fishing like the Mississippi Delta. So just think about the Mississippi River, how much water is pushing through that. That water's murky, and so to get the clear water, we were having to go back into like the protected. They call them like lakes and ponds, but they're basically it basically looks like a big lake. And the water is fresh enough to have bass. So I have some cool footage. I was fighting a bass and looked down. There's like a 20-pound redfish that was swimming 15 feet away from the boat. And so I just let my bass, I just free lined it, let the bass swim off, not scare off the redfish. Joe pitches a lure to it and it smokes it. But so long story short, we were fishing these lakes to get the clear water, right? That we just want to get clear water. So that was what we had to do. And the lakes with the most vegetation seemed to have the most fish, right? That vegetation was giving off the oxygen. Otherwise, if it was just flat and muddy bottom, it was going to be too hot. And for those of you who are watching, let me pull that footage up.
In terms of moving water, do you feel like the closer we got to some of the bigger waterways from the Mississippi, meaning was it getting worse, do you think, the further kind of we went in and where there's like these stagnant lakes?
Yeah, I mean, remember we went that one, we pulled up really shallow and we kind of got like past the it was shallow and there wasn't as much vegetation.
Yep.
That was where we stopped. We weren't catching fish. And then as soon as we got around that corner and we got into that trough, that's where we actually doubled up on those great fish. So can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yeah. So this video, so I'm fighting the fish off to the right. If you look real closely, you can see a redfish. So this redfish is going away from us at like maybe like a 45-degree angle away. It's probably 15 feet from the boat. And Joe, in a second here, you can see Joe's cast just goes and lands out in front of it. The redfish is facing this direction. And the redfish is now right here. And Joe just takes this paddle tail right in front of it. And there it is. It just went up and smoked it. That was like a 20-pound redfish. It was so cool. And now I just pull my bass up, right? So I'm literally pulling the bass up at the same time. Joe just hooked this giant redfish right in front of the boat.
And all of a sudden, he was way over there.
Yeah. And we ended up
ripping out line.
Yeah, that one ended up breaking off because all these weeds out there. There was so much It wasn't hydro. It looked like hydrilla. It was some other type of vegetation, but there was a lot of vegetation out there, and they gave those fish a lot of places to get in trouble.
So cool. So, while we're talking about these similarities, let's talk about lures and the fact. I mean, we caught. I mean, it got to the point where if it wasn't like at least 40 inches, we weren't even taking a picture of the redfish anymore. But we were using the exact same lures that we use in Florida, right? And the same lures I've used when we go to Georgia. I mean, literally not changing up anything and still getting the same kind of strikes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's again, it's a fish is a fish is a fish, right? It doesn't matter where they're living; they had the same biological preferences. There is a lot of different baits in different regions. That is, of course, true, but still, like those same baits, kind of have the same. As long as it has like a general, similar silhouette, the same lure doesn't have to look perfect. Like
Well,
even
so
like think of like a spoon, right? Like a spoon totally looks bland. It just gives vibration, flash, and the fish, think it's a nice tasty meal, and they'll go up there and swipe it.
So something that might be a little bit controversial, and I don't know that anyone has the answer to this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on color. And I've seen it in some of our forums. We have a private fishing club, and we have people that are hardcore fishermen in Texas and Louisiana and Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia, Alabama, and a lot of people seem to think that, oh, this color won't work because I live here. What do you think about colors?
Well, I think color is a distant third as far as what factors need to be considered when with lure selection. The first one, like number one, by far, is the actual the action in the water. Like, does the action of the in the water of the lure resemble some sort of meal that a predator would want to eat? If the answer to that is no, it doesn't matter what color it is. And then number two is it like the size, like the size or silhouette, like does the size, right, the motion and the size correlate to what they're looking for? If either of those are off, it doesn't matter what color it is, right? And if those two are both on, in my opinion, it also doesn't really matter what color it is. Like it's really hard to actually test this on redfish scientifically. There was an actual test. I can't remember what kind of fish they were using, but it was I think they were using some sort of shrimp imitation and then live shrimp on some sort of fish. It wasn't reds, but the conclusion was that something that was mimicking the actual shrimp, the movement was the number one by far. And I have tested this, at least I've tried to test it on my own, where I'll go out. If I get into a bunch of redfish, I'll just switch the colors around, right? Like that one day, Joe, I guess you weren't there. It was that Labor Day, and Dad, you got there a day after I did. Dad and I went fishing together, and we just got on some reds that we were exploring a new spot, and we probably caught, I mean, over a dozen in like an hour. It was just one after the other, all artificial lures, and I was basically catching one, and then I'll throw a different lure out, to see what was working best, or see like just to kind of prove the theory that color and lure type doesn't really matter. So I caught some redfish on light color soft plastics, dark soft plastics, different size lures. So long story short is if you find the fish, the actual like finding the fish is number one, and then the lure selection is a distant two, and the actual color of the lure is like way down on the priorities list. So absolutely, yes, color does make a little bit of a difference, but that the energy in trying to find the perfect lure for the given day would be better utilized just trying to find a better spot, trying to think of why a fish would be at a certain spot versus another, and then going there and doing that.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to like more Florida redfish. You talked about some of your favorite times right now. What about coming up pretty soon? Here is the fall. I mean, we just got into football season here. What's the next pattern? We don't maybe have time to go all year long, but like what's next?
Well, I mean, the inshore, like the slot size reds are inshore all year long. They're accessible. They can be caught at any time. I don't really have a favorite season for those. because there's always there, and it's just a matter of using the right tactics and strategies for the given conditions. But as far as the fall in particular, definitely that's when the big, like the highlight for redfish is that's generally when the big breeder redfish are coming inshore. So this is the best time to catch the way over slots up in the shallows. They do all the spawning offshore, and they come in now, and they're in there to feed. We'll start seeing a lot more bigger fish, and like in the fishing forums from inshore anglers, because that's when they're going to, and like the passes and inlets are the best place to find them. It's the most consistent places to find them, but they'll definitely be able to up on the flats as well. I personally prefer sticking closer to the Gulf and Atlantic, without getting it's like I live in upper Hillsborough Bay, and for those big fish, yes, they do come up here sometimes, but it's just way like this. Statistically, the odds of catching a big bull redfish is higher closer to the in this case the Gulf. So areas like Fort DeSoto and in that region, like St. Pete Beach, Clearwater, those are going to have a lot, like way more bigger redfish per capita than like way up here in Hillsborough Bay. So yeah, so as far as like the big thing in the fall, that's the target. That if you want to catch big reds, that's the time. And the passes and inlets and twilight period are my favorite time to get those.
And I mean, what's funny is we were asking the lodge owner there that same question, and he literally kind of said what you said, right? That in their case, they're having the same big bull reds coming right back in, and he's like, it's madness. Like, he's like, November, he's like, if they're big into duck hunting there too, it's a great destination to go duck hunting. But he's like, it's the craziest thing you've ever seen here with these big bull reds. So they're behaving the same way all over the place.
Yeah, and he has this down to, but they're Louisiana. They have a lot of those big reds there all year long. So they're yes, there are some, but like it was insane how many big reds are back in those lakes. And we were hearing similar reports from the people who are fishing just on like the outside, like the outer areas of the delta. The water was more murky. They're using popping corks and just loud lures and getting some giant fish. But yeah, one thing he just said that caught me was he's like, I recommend like anytime during the fall except for the week of the full moon of September. And because he's like, every single year they literally go offshore to breed for like 3 to 5 days or a week, and they come back in, and then it's game on again. So he's like, the fall's amazing except for that 1 week. And it was pretty cool that he had it down to a science like that.
Yeah, he said for like a couple decades as long as he's been tracking it, it's been like that.
Yep,
it was pretty cool. All right, so you got some more footage from that trip?
Yeah, let me hop on over. And can you see the screen?
Yep.
All right, so what we have here, and this was at least my opinion, probably the coolest footage that we got, and it was cool for a couple of reasons. This was the area that we had just gone. We were exploring a new lake that CA had never fished, and we pulled up. We were catching a few. We saw a decent amount, and then we got to like a shallow region where the grass wasn't as thick nor as healthy, and there really wasn't much activity. So CA turned to go down towards this little cut. And as soon as we got in there, like we looked down, and there's this giant redfish with 2 others following it. And it was probably maybe 15 feet away when we spotted it. Joe had his bait ready. So if you can see on here, this is a giant, it turns out to be 42 inches. It's a really nice red coming right at us. And when it was only like 12 feet away, Joe just underhand tossed his bait, and it was using, what would you have, like a paddle tail, Joe? Z-Man, I think.
Yep, some Z-Man, something that floated. I don't remember the name of the actual lure though.
Yeah, I think it was the Grass Kicker Z, but it's like 7 inches, a big paddle tail that floats, rigged on a weightless hook, and tossed it in front, and just reeled it in a hair, and that redfish came and just inhaled it. It was really was amazing. And but that was cool. That was cool in itself. But literally, like 2 redfish was with it, and they didn't leave. And I tossed my lure in there, and it just inhaled that literally right in front, while Joe's redfish was ripping drag out. So it was just such a cool experience. I've never seen bites like that in Florida. It was nuts.
Yeah, that was a blast. So this, I guess, is a good segue to talk about some of the differences. And I had a you made me look good on that one because I that second day, like I was on, like I got it. But that very first day, when you're sight fishing redfish in Florida, we're used to leading these fish. I was used to casting quite a bit ahead of them and getting right in front of them. And Louisiana, it was kind of it wasn't the opposite, but you wanted a whole lot tighter. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, so good point. We both struggled that first day. It was because we see a fish and see it, was like, hey, cast to it, that cast on it, and like in my mind, casting to sight fishing a redfish, you're like leading it by at least 5, if not 10 feet, right? You see its line, and you're casting way ahead of it so you don't spook it, right? And just knowing that as long as the fish stays at the same line, you just want your bait to intercept it, at a given point. These redfish are kind of meandering, like they some of the Florida ones that when they are on a flat, they're either static and they're like in a ambush position, or they're just kind of going down a flat, mostly straight. Um, these redfish in these in those lakes and ponds up there, they just kind of meandered. It seemed like that they would be going, and all of a sudden, like literally do like a 90-degree turn
Yeah.
out of the blue. And so if you lead them, it's a very good chance that they're not going to be where you think they're going to be. So you literally have to cast like a foot over and a foot past where they're going. That way, like within seconds, you can have your lure right in front of their face. And if it's not in front of their face, they're not going to eat it. Was another lesson. Like I guess there's just so much food out there, from like crabs, snails, mullet. I mean, there's all sorts of bait and all sorts of food. So that's why they're so fat.
Yeah, that's why they're fat, and that's why they're meandering. They're probably getting a scent every second. They're on a new scent trail. Because remember, like even pulling up some of those, some of the it wasn't hydrilla, but some of those weeds,
Yep.
and how many snails and little crabs and shrimp were falling off. I mean, it was crazy. It was like an entire ecosystem in that one handful of grass, and it was grass like that as far as you could see. It was nuts.
Yeah, so the fish were in the same type of zones that they would be otherwise, but yeah, the tactical difference on these Louisiana redfish compared to like any Florida redfish I've ever fished, where if I would ever drop a 7-inch lure a foot in front of a big redfish on a Florida flat, it's like guaranteed you're going to spook it.
Yeah.
But they're like those fish, I guess they don't get as much pressure. They wouldn't spook, and then best of all, they would react. Like as soon as it started moving, they'll come up and smack it.
What did Captain Ryan say? Was it the 2x2 rule there versus like a 5x5? Was that the number?
Something like that, yeah. So it's all about.
So explain what that means to the layperson.
Well, yeah. So it was either 1x1 or 2x2, but yeah. So cast 2x2 mean cast 2 feet in front of the direction it's going, and then 2 feet past it. Right. So that way you just pull it back, and the lure has enough time to get down to the right depth and then start moving towards it like it was natural. Whereas in Florida, if you cast 2 feet away from a redfish in shallow water, it's gone. It's going to, unless you're using a fly, even with some like light flies, they'll still spook. But as in Florida, it's usually like a 5x5, right? 5 feet over, 5 feet forward. And then there's just more time to intercept it. So if the redfish turns, you have much better chance on the 2x2 versus the 5x5, as long as you don't spook it. So long story short, cast as close as you can without spooking. Louisiana, like areas that don't have much pressure like that, like at least that region that we were in, you can cast really close. But most Florida flats, you definitely need to lead by at least 5 feet.
Yep. So what are some other differences you think in these fish?
Well, that was the big one. As far as the lures on the outside, seemed like one of the more popular baits was popping cork with like a shrimp, like a little jig rigged up underneath it. That was very popular. And it doesn't seem like that's quite as popular over here, like in Central Florida. Yes, it does work, but I think the reason why it's so effective over there is just because the water's really murky, and the fish, I can't really rely on their eyes. It's really about like their actual feel on vibration. So they'll feel that big old popping cork, making that racket, come up to investigate, and then see that jig that's underneath the bobber, come up and smack it.
Yeah, and that's popular in Texas too for same reason. Yeah.
I know a lot of people, a lot of Florida people use it too. I've tried it, and so far I just prefer to use a straight jig head so I can control the depth. Like if I'm fishing a grass flat and I see a pothole, I want to be able to work the jig over the flat, and then as soon as it's in the pothole, I want to be able to plop it right down on the bottom. It's typically where the bigger fish are. But again, if you can't see the potholes, and if those fish need to feel the bait to actually find it, then those popping corks or a topwater popper, something that makes more racket is a good lure choice.
Yep.
That's the same premise, whether you're in Florida, the Carolinas, anywhere with darker water. Like North Florida has a lot of dark water, Carolinas, and then in all areas at some point the water should be murky from either a storm or something. So when that does happen, regardless of region, it's just smart to use a louder lure when the water is really murky so that the fish can actually locate your lure.
Yep. What I thought was interesting, Captaincy Richardson, who invited us out there for those 2 days, he's there for, I think it's like 32 days straight. And he does this every year. And he used to do a lot of tournament fishing back before flats class started. And Louisiana was, basically that whole redfish series. And they were fishing Florida, Carolinas, Texas, Louisiana. And he spent a lot of time over there. And now he's got, some of his top paying customers are coming over, and a lot of them do live in Florida and are flying over, to fish with him. And I'm not going to get into what he charges, but he's basically charging almost doubles because it's an experience and you're getting to do something really unique. But he's using, and I asked him, I was like, man, are you using anything different? He's like, no, he literally brings the exact same tackle that he uses in Florida with a lot of money on the line. I mean, he's got to make sure these people are happy. They're literally flying across states and paying a whole lot more money to fish with him. And he's literally using the exact same tackle that he uses in Florida. And I mean, it was every day. He said that it's almost impossible where we were to get skunked because there is so little pressure. I mean, that one day, I think we saw one boat, and the second day we saw like one boat, like an airboat, the entire day. But yet, I mean, he's got that much confidence in these things because they work, which goes to your point earlier is locate the fish. And that's what C is really good at doing. As soon as he finds the fish, he's like, man, we can throw whatever we want at him. We got the right silhouette, got the right size. And not once did we talk about colors, in those 2 days. It was just all about finding the fish.
Yeah. And there's, there's actually there's more guides out there than I thought that are actually Florida guides for most of the year. And they'll go over there to take it, just to go out there and take people to those big reds. And it's just, again, further proof that, that you don't have to be like a region specific guide where like every region is in its own little time capsule, its own little individual segment, where these Florida guides, they're taking the same tactics they learned and kind of honed in Florida and applying it to Louisiana to a point where they literally can go there for business and take people out and consistently catch good fish. So it's not all about, trying to be like an expert in a region. It's more about, learning why redfish are moving, what caused, what their biology makes them do, right? Whether they're thinking about it or not, just like what caused them to move and when do they move. And when you know that, you'll be able to put your right spot at the right time, regardless if you're in Louisiana, Texas, Florida, Carolinas. It's really about learning the intricacies, the high level strategies, and then just applying them to wherever you're fishing.
Yep. And a quick little plug, if you need help with that, if you're not as consistent with catching redfish as you want to be, especially with artificial lures, we have a whole course. It's our most popular course, maybe one because it's such a popular fish. But I mean, it's our most popular course by a long shot, called Redfish Mastery. You can find that at saltstrong.com. And we have a whole redfish skunk factor completely free that actually helps you identify like your number one challenge, one thing holding you back from consistently catching redfish. And it has a quick little video, and then just being transparent, it has an offer to buy the course right after that at a really low price. So definitely check that out. You can even Google redfish skunk factor, and you can go through it completely for free. And then you'll have a risk-free offer for 365 days to get it. And I do that plug for one, because I know that course like impacted a lot of people. I don't know if you saw that email I sent to you today. It was right before we did this podcast, but it's one of our fishing club members who's been through that course, and he got first place in the CCA Star. Did you read that yet?
Yeah, I saw he won a kayak. Yeah, it's
Yeah, how
pretty cool.
awesome is that? And
He didn't know about kayak fishing 2 years ago.
yeah, he literally had never been on a kayak 2 years ago, and he really hadn't really caught that much inshore fish, I don't think. Maybe a couple, and he literally gave us all the props. Clearly, he needs the props because he went out and did it and took action on it. But he gave us the props of just kind of teaching him the right way and the wrong way to do it. And we had Captain Mike Anderson on recently from the Real Animals, and at the end, and I did not persuade him to say this. And at the end, I said, like, Mike, what's your one tip? Like, if you could give one piece of advice to the weekend warriors out there, what would it be? And he thought about it for a second. He's like, learn how to use artificial lures. He's like, it's a game changer. And dude, you and I were there. I mean, we were held hostage to live bait, and we had to basically, every trip was planned around getting bait. And if we didn't, it was frustrating. Sometimes we had to go back to the marina and buy shrimp. It was just, it killed so much of the day. And for weekend warriors in particular, you have a limited time out in the water. You got a hall pass. It is so critical, and it gives you so much more freedom and so much more control to be able to go out there and catch fish quickly using artificial lures, not having to worry about a live well working and getting the right bait. It's to your point earlier, once you find the fish, the most important part, then find out what they're feeding on. Sometimes it's going to be little small baits. In that case, you're going to change up your lure, maybe go a little bit smaller. Sometimes it's the big boys, like that 7-inch Z-Man I was using. You just never know. But that's the beauty about having a couple different baits and different sizes for different depths, and boom, you're out there catching fish right away. So that was a
That was my biggest
longer plug
regret.
than I thought it would be, but
That was
it
definitely
is important.
Yeah, that was my biggest regret looking back, is that for years, like literally years, transitioning from a bass angler to inshore saltwater, and like all, it was I had like multiple cast nets, I was just dealing with that, and I would only fish if I like had a whole live well full of bait, and if I didn't, then like it was total, like the day's ruined, right? It was all about the bait. And in reality, when you have the bait, it's great, but it'll prevent you from being able to cover as much ground. So if you're not on the water, like, for fishing guides, it's a no-brainer. You don't have to, but to get, unskilled people on fish every day, you pretty much have to use live bait. But they know they're on the water every day. They know where the bait is and they know where the fish are.
Yep.
Without knowing both of those, for the typical weekend warrior fishes, 2 times a month, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to find the bait. And then once you have the bait, you don't know exactly where the fish are.
Yep.
And so with lures, you just go out and you can immediately start covering ground. And it's really a numbers game. It's just, can you find where the most fish are? And then can you get a lure in front of their face? So now I for inshore fishing, and redfish in particular, they're very prone to eat artificials really throughout the day. So it is, I pretty much never take live bait with me anymore for inshore.
All right. So if, in your opinion, if you're going to take one bait, like to master just one good all-around lure for redfish, large or small, what would it be?
Yeah, the paddle. I mean, a soft plastic paddle tail on a jig head is like probably the best all around combination, as far as you can cover all sorts of different water columns. You don't have to do anything fancy with the tree, just cast and reel. And yeah, that's what we started with, right? That's what we started out with, trout, and then started to realize trout will be typically in the deeper zones, and then learned that redfish are going to be patrolling like the shorelines up in the shallows. And I would just get like a 1/8 ounce jig head with like a 3 to 4 inch paddle tail, little swim bait.
Yeah, and we like we're not affiliated with Z-Man, but that seems to be the one that I like the best right now. They just last so stinking long.
Yeah, Z-Man, as far as just covering a lot of ground quickly, Z-Man is tough to beat. But as far as getting strikes, a gulp shrimp rigged on a jig head is awesome. That's all I was using down in Goodland when I was catching all those fish in that creek.
Yep.
I was just slow bouncing the gulp. Something about the gulp products is that their scent, like, it really does make a difference. And I've, this is after years of testing a lot of different lures. I don't know what they put in those things, but the scent is good. The bad thing though is that for whatever reason, they've changed the formula or something. So like the actual baits are really soft. So you'll get a lot of the baits torn up quickly, but especially compared to Z-Man. But when in need of a strike, having those gulp shrimp on board, really do generate strikes.
Yep. Cool, man. So final question. What do you think's the best fishery for redfish, Florida, Louisiana?
I say it's whichever one I can go to is in my next trip, right? It's just kind of like when's the best time to fish? Just go whenever you can, right?
Yeah.
Like it's impossible to find the best tide. There's no such thing as the perfect time or the perfect tide or perfect water temperature. Just go and just take note of what the conditions are and then make a plan accordingly. But I mean, as far as like what the best fishery is, I mean that stuff, that sight fishing, those big reds in Louisiana, like I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
I would be remiss in saying that that Louisiana does not have an amazing fishery,
Yeah.
but Florida has amazing fishery too, and I don't know, they're all fun. I like fishing anywhere, so I'll say that experience we had out there truly was amazing, and so that was really cool. But
Yeah.
Florida's awesome as well, so
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to do that at least once. What a cool place. And check out Cajun Fishing Adventures. We'll put a note or a link in the show notes to that and that Redfish Skunk Factor I told you about earlier. Check them out. Really cool lodge, awesome people. They really took care of us. And but to your point, you don't have to go to Louisiana to catch redfish. So for those of you that are struggling and maybe you've never caught one, or maybe you catch them just here and there, they're in your backyard. The biggest thing is to just study the biology like we've been talking about today. Like, why are they going to be in certain places at certain times? And once you got that, everything else starts falling into place. And we have an entire fishing club called the Insider Fishing Club, where that is the focus, trends. And yeah, I met a guy actually at Little Gasparilla Island, Boca Grande, right next to Little Gasparilla Island, for Labor Day, and he's new. He just got a new condo, had a new boat there, and he told me he was struggling. I was like, well, like, what are you planning on doing with it? I was hoping he was gonna, and I think he did actually join the club. And he's like, well, I hired a guide, and I'm going out with him tomorrow, and I'm basically gonna, get his spots. And one, I don't think that's that cool, like to get someone's spots, and I coached him on it but that's how newbies think, right? And so, but two, like he's only going to take you to a couple spots, and those couple spots are probably good spots for right now. But I guarantee you, those spots are not going to be that good come January and February, and all of a sudden you're going to be skunked again and frustrated, wondering why those spots don't produce. It's like these guides, they don't go to the same 4 spots all year long. They're going to where the fish are based on trends. It's like you gotta understand the trends before you can lock in good spots. Spots stay the same. They're static. Fish are moving around all the time. So, I mean, I don't know how many times that we can say that, and we'll probably be saying it 10 years from now, but it's so critical to start understanding those trends. And if you want more on that, join us in the Insider Fishing Club, and we're putting up new trends every single week on why these fish are moving. And once you get that why, that's when all the magic happens.
Yeah, and what we're teaching is literally the stuff that we wish we would have known sooner. Yeah. The stuff that we struggled for many years, and we're still learning. Like that's the cool thing about fishing is there's always something new to learn, and that's why our courses, everything we do comes with a entire 365-day guarantee to make sure that you see that it works. And the cool thing about the club too is, like, we do have a fish sharing, report sharing platform on there where the members, now we have over 5,000 members that are sharing their catch reports, sharing tips on there. And I learned from that on a weekly basis, just seeing there's just some different cool things that others are doing. And it's, I've had some really good tips, and you can just see some new trends.
Yep.
Like
Anglers helping anglers.
Yeah, I saw one report glass minnows were on the beach. That was on the Atlantic side, and so I went out on the beach over here in the Gulf, a bunch of glass minnows, and I got into a bunch of good snook just 2 days ago. So it's there's never we know it all in fishing. It's always a learning adventure, and that's the cool thing about it. There's no official I've solved everything point.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So if you want to become better, or if you're a guy, we have a lot of guides that join us that do just want to help. There's so many that have been doing it for a long time and just want to give back and teach and get that next generation fishing as well. Then we'd love to have you in the club. So check that out. It'll all be there in the show notes. And if you want to see or hear any of the past Fish Strong episodes, go to saltstrong.com/podcast. And please on the podcast, please do subscribe to us. Leave us a review. It's how we're able to grow. It's how we're able to be found more in these search engines, which helps us go get better guests. That's what we've seen over time, is now that it's actually showing up towards the top in iTunes for saltwater fishing. we're now starting to get a whole lot better guests, and which just brings more value to you guys, gets more tips, gets get some really cool celebrity fishermen here. So thank you all for the support. Tight lines. And if you have any questions on redfish or thoughts or things that you think we missed or want us to cover, let us know down below in the comments.
See ya.
Peace.